We asked Lawanda to give us a perspective of what Pernell sees in terms of what the opportunities and benefits are, how they're moving forward in presenting those to both its customers and its company, and what they are looking for to achieve with the concept of a smart utility. So we'll have to pass that.
Well, one of the things I wanted to start off with is, as an industry, I think we've done ourselves a disservice with the term smart utility and smart grid. We haven't done a really good job of talking about what that means in terms that our customers understand. Each utility goes at it and they say, well, I'm doing smart grid, and they have a little different explanation and a definition and how they describe it. But I think as an industry, we need to talk about it. Again, and one of my key things is know your audience. Customers view this in terms that matter to them, and then you look at investors. Again, they're looking at everything from dollars and cents. Okay, then you have to explain it and define it in terms that they value and they understand. So as an industry, I think we've got to do it as an industry level and talk about what is smart utility, what is a smart grid, and what's the value, and again, target your audience. So when you now, if I step back and talk about what PEC, Pernell, is doing, there's a lot of different pieces, and you've heard everyone talk about the various pieces of digitizing, the smart grid and the things you're doing, and there's lots of pieces to that. And some of the things that I want to talk about briefly is talk about, when you talk about digitizing the utility and you look at what are the things that we're doing, one of those things is making sure that the equipment and the assets are resistant, accessible, and reliable. Something as simple as having heat-resistant switches at a substation. Think about that. When you're thinking about Texas and you're talking about 99-degree heat and 100-degree temperatures, and some of those switches are in a metal building, and think about how hot that gets. And you think about the switches, and so doing some actual real-life testing of those switches and making sure that they're heat-resistant, because it's all about, can those folks in the control room see that substation, and making sure that it's reliable. And something as simple as having both a primary and a backup connectivity to every substation, whether that primary is fiber, maybe your backup is wireless, maybe it's satellite. But again, having a backup, again, it's about reliability, accessibility. As Charles talked about, nobody cares about it until you can't see it. And then they say, well, why didn't you think of this earlier, and why can't I see it? But again, it's those simple things that matter. And then you talk about culture, and Lisa talked about it a little bit. When you look at the type of people, and again, this is about digitizing the utility, is the type of people that you put in positions. And you look at who's in that control room, for instance. One of the things that was significant that we did is, we have your typical control operator. He's sitting in front of a screen and he's looking at the SCADA systems. Guess what? They came and hired some of my IT staff to be there. Now think about the different skill set and what that brings to a control room. Now you have folks in there that understand servers, they understand networks. Again, he's an operator, but now you've got someone in there that can dig beneath just the SCADA applications and figure out what's going. Because when you look at it from a pure technology perspective, the network and the servers and the domain, that skill set is the same whether you're on the SCADA network or you're on the corporate network. That skill set's the same. Where it starts to differentiate is at the application level. When you start talking about an OSI or a SCADA system, that's where it starts to differ, and you need that application experience. So those things are some of the things that we're doing, and I can't not talk about cybersecurity, because that is so very important. And again, folks in the control room haven't been bothered with that topic. If you go back 5-8 years ago, they were more concerned about making sure the SCADA system is reliable, it's up, I can see everything, I can see all of the assets. And now they really have to be concerned. And again, hiring someone from an IT staff with that background, putting them in that control room is really important. And every one of you've heard the explanation that says, the last barrier between a malware attack and your systems is the human factor, and making sure that those folks are trained. One example, we've done cyber training for every employee, and we continue to do that. And it's practice, practice, practice. And one of our employees actually caught a near zero-day malware before it was even, McAfee hadn't caught it, Symantec hadn't caught it, and we reported that to them and EISAC. And that's about making them aware and making them self-conscious about every piece of email that comes in, every attachment that comes in. If it looks legitimate, it may not be legitimate. If you're not expecting it, probably shouldn't open it. And so, some of them say, well, now we're overly sensitive. I'd rather you be overly sensitive, because no semantic software, no McAfee, no Google is a foolproof precaution and safety net before it gets inside your network, and that's the worst place it can be.
Spoken as a true CIO.
So that's why my emails don't get responded.
Yeah.
There's a special filter there for
Yeah, I'm gonna go with
Andreas
that.
and CMG. So great, Lawanda. In listening to you describe Pernell's view, do you see it as, if you look at smart grid, smart utility, edge utility, do you see it as an opportunity or a challenge right now?
I see it as both. An opportunity because it will make, again, it's about what are the customers asking for, what do they need, but a challenge because it's always about, at the end of the day, how much can you afford? Where are you getting that spend level from? So there's the challenges of how do you fund this, how do you pay for it, and then you have to weigh that against, how much risk are you willing to take? You're always going to have some amount of risk. What's acceptable risk and what can I afford? So it's a bit of both.
Great. Anything to add? Okay. Go ahead, Kenan.
I was just going to share that, it's also exciting because there's these new challenges, new opportunities provided by these types of services, innovation, and so forth. And we are actually attracting a lot of really good talent because they want to work on these kind of interesting topics.
Exactly. Great. So, Dan, maybe let's pivot to you. If you look back in time, as Andreas has talked about, Austin Energy would arguably be one of the founders of a smart grid initiative and what was put in place here in early 2000s. And at the time, we tended to look at the focus of technology. What is the technology and how is it applied? But now, arguably almost 2 decades later, how has that challenge moved from technology to one of operations? And are we seeing smart edge, smart grid become an improvement or a threat to that operations, reliability, sustainability? And what might Austin Energy be doing with that right now?
Well, up front, answering the last question first, I definitely don't see it as a threat. I actually think that this is going to be a huge enhancement moving forward. I do have to state up front, too, I guess we'd say Austin Energy is flattered by the comments, but I also see how industry partners, both from the private sector as well as other utilities, have really work together to bring different solutions. And I'll give some example, and maybe I'll give you a framework, and then I'll talk about some of the challenges and some of the things that we're working through. But probably one of the key operational frameworks, we've already talked about AMI for a moment, and that is a foundational, ubiquitous building block to a smart grid, intelligent grid, grid modernization, whatever term you want to use. It's absolutely foundational. I think people know that. It's foundational certainly because it does a whole lot more than just accurately billing our customers, but it provides their customer a lot more granularity into how they use their energy, making decisions that not only can save them money, but potentially offer them even problems that they may have in their home, their HVAC system. But it's also, and in our case, we have 488,000 of these, and they're basically a sensor. And so how we integrate that into our operations is unbelievably powerful, right? I mean, not only for how we dispatch our resources and have operational efficiency, but also how we are improving the reliability of the grid. So that's one block. But we, as Charles had shared, and many others have shared, we've shifted from this one-way flow of information and power to two-way flow of power, two-way flow of information. by the way, we've been doing that for, a long time in the transmission system, right? Most of you know the transmission system's most places are not radially fed. So we've been doing two-way flows of power, two-way flow of information. We've been putting microprocessor devices for 25 plus years on those systems. We're really taking that level of intelligence and just bringing it into the distribution world. And so to me, another foundational ubiquitous building block that we need to have is some form of distribution management system, very much like our SCADA EMS systems of the world. So many utilities are integrating and putting in advanced distribution management systems. Austin Energy has been about 5 years live with one. And I'll stop there just to say that integration, so this is maybe a rebuttal of the previous panel. The previous panel might have been stating about 5G, and that's fine and all, but I can tell you that integration between AMI and ADMS is not trivial, and it had a lot of challenges and still does. So I'll give you an example. That capability has unbelievable value to our customers. One part of that value is that we now know the customer's out, right? There used to be the day in Austin, I'm embarrassed to say, Andres was there, he knows probably, he says, you got to call us to let you know your power's out, right? Well, now with the AMI integration, we're able to have last gasp. We get information of customers out. Our system goes into our operator. Our operator now can dispatch a truck and all. You can do other things related to that too. Well, we integrated that also with our customer care system. We also set up where we were able to give messages to our customers to say, hey, we know your power's out. We've dispatched a truck. Your estimated time to restoration looks like this. So great, all works nice. Well, what happens when one of these system upgrades? Ideally, that integration's not broken, right? But that didn't always happen. In fact, I had one of my electric utility commissioners tell me, why is it that I'm not getting text messages anymore? That's a fun question, right? One of your people that are helping to govern you and stuff. So I have that opportunity to talk to him, and then we dig in and we find, there was an upgrade that happened, and I don't give into the details of that, but that upgrade basically broke that integration, and it didn't work for that customer. This is an interesting thing, right? It's worked for most customers, but it broke that particular, he had a unique situation. So anyway, what I'm getting to for a moment here, and I'll build on this for a moment, is this is really important. The grid's not going away, but it's certainly changing. It's becoming this platform, it's interoperable, it's flexible. We have to allow customers this choice, but the utilities are going to continue to have to safely and reliably operate that, and we can really do it better by being able to integrate these IT/OT systems. And so I could go a long time, which I thought about this when I said, okay, what are all the challenges? Okay, well, we have all day, because I'm happy to talk about those, but I do believe we're solving some of them. And part of that, and Lawanda really brought up a great point. It's really kind of cool that you got people in IT going into operations and all. But we're seeing that too. So there was the day where we're obviously siloed, IT, OT. Now we started blurring, but now we're just seeing it embedded. And we're similar situation for us where you can't really tell, that this person working in the operations area is actually an IT person and all. Credit to you, Greg. He's my CTO in here because he's part of that. But we're changing, and we have to, right? And the reality is, when I talked about it, I could go. Our ADMS has over 20 integrations at this point. Over 20. You have to involve a lot of people in the utility to make that work right. So that's an exciting part, and we're just seeing a much more everybody's in this together type thing, supporting other deliveries, and I probably well exceeded 5 minutes. But I don't know. Is that?
No, it's great.
Okay.
And one would think that this is the most prepared panel, given how Dan just led us into what the discussion of integration. Or we're real time, one of the two. We have to decide, Sacha. But it was interesting, the panel before us talked about, is the technology available? And we got to depend, I think, one solid yes, two yeses. But the question I would argue is, Sacha, what are we seeing with the integration of those technologies? And can they stand alone? The utility that I joined a couple decades ago had a lot of very vertical systems and a lot of paper and phone calls that interacted between those systems. Now we've got the opportunity, certainly, to integrate it, but the question is opportunity now moving towards more of a requirement? no longer an opportunity for us to consider, but a requirement for us to consider. So what are you seeing at Siemens in the development of all this great technology?
Absolutely, what we're seeing is definitely OT and IT convergence. And before Siemens, I spent 12 years working for utilities, and then another 8 years for the vendor side. And when I was at Duke, we had that issue. It's not just back office. We had linemen installing reclosers, typical work that they did, but now they were intelligent reclosers. They had a security gateway, they had a modem, there was telecommunication associated to it, so that we could build a self-healing grid. And what we called it was little screwdriver and big screwdriver. Some people call it big hammer, little hammer. But the idea is that even the field crews need to have some training, and we started a whole new classification of employees over there for that, to have that OT, IT convergence there. Now, again, I grew up on both the utility and the vendor side, and when I worked at GE, I remember that our EMS, we're talking about somewhere around, if you walk into a control system for transmission, you're talking about 10,000 points, in the tens of thousands, let's put it that way. If you go into a distribution control system, you're probably talking about a couple of hundreds of thousand points. Now, I like to see the challenges going forward. I like to see them as three numbers, some of which you heard yesterday, which is 50 billion new connected devices, and then 0.5% of them analyzed, of the data being analyzed. And then the last one is 39 seconds. That's the number of seconds that pass by before a hack happens. So we were just talking about the old way of doing it with tens of thousands of points and hundreds of thousands of points. I used to move to a filing cabinet, pull out a spec on a protocol and say, we've got a new device to install, and I'd spend a month programming it. That was my first job. Spend a month programming it, testing it, getting it working. Now, let me ask you for your computers, when's the last time you plugged something into your USB and had to pull out a CD and put a driver on? When you have that many devices, when you're going to 50 billion devices with who knows how many points behind each one, you're no longer able to talk about point-to-point integration. We need to move towards a plug-and-play integration, true plug-and-play from multiple vendors, something that is still a challenge for our industry in the energy and utility business. So, George said it yesterday. We think Siemens is on the forefront there. We've got our IoT platform, a cloud-based platform we see as a potential there. And in fact, though, our whole company got restructured so that energy isn't just utilities, it isn't just co-ops, and to a point earlier, it's not just steel in the ground anymore. We're talking about truly a distributed network. So we put our building technology group with our energy group, and we made a smart infrastructure group. So that's definitely one of the big challenges that all these new devices, all these prosumers are going to be bringing that we still need to address. Now the 0.5%, all this data is coming in. We need a way to store it. And very quickly, I remember a job at a utility where we had transformers coming in for transmission. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars for a transformer, and or $10 million for that one. And you don't keep that on inventory. It's not worth it. Now, we put sensors into it. This was 2005, put sensors into it to do predictive maintenance on it. And it was like opening a faucet and letting the data go down the drain, because we didn't even have a historian for it at the time. So the next step is really doing analytics, and you hear about, hey, let's do analytics. And now we have to go, the challenge is going beyond just analytics. Let's get to answers. And again, because the industry is going beyond steel in the ground, we're not talking about just analytics on hardware, on the assets we have. Next year, in 6 months actually, California is every low-rise building in California is gonna have rooftop solar. It's great to do net metering. There are challenges with it in terms of how you monetize that. So the next step is really forecasting and letting the greater grid benefit from people's rooftop solar. It's gonna be there. We need a way to address that challenge by doing forecasting and visibility to there. The last one, I'll be really quick because I know I've taken a while. 39 seconds, a hack every 39 seconds. That's all industries. But doing another panel discussion, I found out that the Department of Defense, in collaboration with the Department of Energy, classified the threats to utilities, and a really funny name came out to me, which was Energetic Bear, which is a state-sponsored hacking group from Russia. So they have threat levels for utilities, and these threat levels, most of the bigger ones are state-sponsored. So they're well-organized, they're active, and we definitely need to be cognizant of it from the IT side, but I would say from building out a distributed grid, we can look at it in different ways. If you look at a microgrid as giving you reliability and sustainability, economic benefit as well, it's also, it doesn't care if you're setting it up to run independently because there is a disturbance on the grid because of an electrical problem, or the disturbance is a self-imposed quarantine because of a threat to from a cyber attack. So those are the major threats I see. There's one more, but I'll give some time to the rest of the panel.
Great. Thanks, Sacha. So, Kenan, maybe a great opportunity to continue down the path of integration, and utilities are no longer in control of their own destiny, short of what switch got flipped on and off. And maybe what better place to start is, where does ERCOT see that, and what needs to be enabled from an integration standpoint, not from maybe technology, but from markets and business, to make sure we optimize all of this technology we're talking about for smart grid?
Yes, thanks. So, I mean, ultimately, given the kind of market construct and so forth that we have, we see the ISO and ERCOT being kind of an integral partner in the financial success of these technologies. And I'll just share a few kind of key items there. But so we've talked about data. The data needs to move up to the ISO if you want to really get full credit for whatever's happening. Otherwise, your actions can get socialized and you're not necessarily going to realize the full benefit of that. So from both a reliability standpoint and a market standpoint, the data needs to flow to us. So if it doesn't, I either don't give enough credit to that activity and I over or under commit the system. Both have societal costs, and those flow to the people that invested in these new technologies. So operationally, if I don't understand what's going on, I can either turn on more generators than I needed to, or I didn't turn on enough. Both are suboptimal outcomes and kind of get in the way of kind of realizing the full benefits financially. This plays out in the markets as well. And I've seen this happen multiple times. Somebody's got a great business model, but they haven't thought about the benefits and how they play out in the wholesale market. So they put it in, and then they haven't built the case to get the data, the information to the ISO. We are the wholesale clearinghouse for the market. So if we don't know what's going on, I can't pay you for it. Or the way I pay you for it, if the data flows too slow, you might have to keep a lot of collateral with us or something else. So there's costs to not getting the data kind of flow, the circle complete. The other point I'd like to make is the business concept needs to align with the market in place, or we need to modify the market in place to make it work. And a lot of times that's an afterthought. So you see the investment being made and folks are in the implementation stage and then are trying to figure out how it's going to pay out and how they're going to realize the financial benefits that they envisioned. And at a minimum, that creates a delay, and sometimes it just is not a viable solution. and that can undermine the investments in both all kinds of cutting-edge technologies. The other observation I will make from a market design standpoint is a lot of times folks try and leverage a market externality or a gap in the market, and that's the business model. The problem is those get closed. So the best example I have right now is we are in the process, in fact, there's a vote happening at our stakeholder meeting today to provide distribution level resources greater than a megawatt, not a zonal average price, but the locational marginal price. This is the reliability baked in price, to say it simply. And ERCOT wants that because we don't want a resource to dispatch if the system doesn't need it. And we want it to get a very high reward if the system really needs the output of the resource. And there are folks that have made their business model based on that zonal price. And that probably is not going to last. And as there's more and more of this on the system, we're going to go deeper and deeper in terms of trying to send these reliability-based prices on down to the customer. So I think it's important that if you're counting on those types of things, don't count on them to last forever. You need to, the ERCOT market has differences than other markets. It's important to know those. And I think the main thing I would want to highlight is we're an energy-only market. Most of the revenue flows through energy. A lot of the other markets are capacity markets, and folks come here thinking, oh, I've built my business model on a capacity market, and it doesn't work out, or there's very limited opportunities in that front. Individually, folks can impact the outcome of the rules that govern our market. We have a stakeholder process that allows for change, and the sooner you get involved there and the sooner you participate, the better we can accommodate your novel ideas or these good ideas that are out there. But I just want to emphasize that there is a flexible change control process that is out there to accommodate this. And certainly we try and get ahead of these things, but ultimately we're going to be a partner and not going to be able to kind of cover every great idea that's out there. So we really want to work with you guys, and we really look forward to the new products that are out there. And the other thing I just want to say is, you know, we've been in the news a lot about kind of planning reserve scarcity and things like that. I see a lot of these types of products introducing what I would call a longer demand curve into the market, which means I can actually, by price, rank order, load, and very surgically let them go away. And that's a big game changer relative to the traditional ways ISOs have been managing reliability on the grid.
Great. So, Richard, we've kind of heard from the industry side of it, and good transition with Kenan talking about what are the customers doing. CPS Energy, arguably one of the more aggressive in terms of customer first, or at least early on in its strategies. What are you seeing from your customers in terms of demand, and how are you balancing what they're looking for and what CPS needs to do for its own mission and objectives?
Okay. So a couple items. I'll talk about, you know, San Antonio has the largest military bases there in San Antonio. We have Randolph, Lackland, Kelly Air Force Base, which got bracked a while back and is run by Lackland. So all joint base San Antonio's there. And our customers are now asking for resiliency behind the meters. So we have master meters, but we are awarded the contract for maintaining the systems behind that meter. And we're taking over the bases from June 1st. But what the military is looking for also is resiliency behind the meter. So they're looking for microgrids. And so we're working with Amorisco to build a microgrid at one of the bases. They're putting a 15 megawatt solar farm. They're putting 8 megawatts of gas generation and a 4 megawatt battery. And so what we need is tools to model that, tools for our system operators can see when the systems, when that system is energized and isolated, how is it performing? So that we can make sure that the benefits from that design are there for the customer. We can't control customers. Customers go, and once the system's designed, we need to make sure that they're not adding load behind that we don't know about, or the system gets reconfigured because they tap off of it, because this is behind the meter. So that is one opportunity and challenge that we're having. Another one is just, we have our water systems, the San Antonio water system. They are also looking for grid resiliency. So typically, utilities offered redundant service, redundant transformers, redundant service from different substations to harden those infrastructures. But now folks are talking about catastrophic events. The weather's changing, we can see the patterns. So now folks are also talking about, well, what if both substations are out? How long is it going to take to pick up service? So we're also looking at, how do I deploy as the utilities migrate from generation to distributed generation, and where do we strategically put those so that we can provide these benefits to the customers and build microgrids for our customers. And so that's kind of what we're working on. The other piece I'll throw out there is just, like what Lawanda said, everybody throws smart in front of everything, and that means different things to different people. So there's a whole nother topic around smart cities, from smart streetlights. It kind of intertwines with all the 5G stuff that's going on. The cities want more sensors, more data points. How do you get back the data to different providers so that they can value that data? So that's kind of what
They're
we're
expecting some integration, it sounds like.
Yes, yes, sir.
Great. So, Paul, we heard a lot about technology. We didn't talk a lot about cost, but I've been there on both sides of the fence. It costs. At the same time, the industry might be considered somewhat under attack of how it continues to make money. So where do we need to look at, or what's the status of the business model, both for how we pay for it, but most of us have investors, whether they're IOUs, municipalities, they expect a return in some way, shape, or form. What do you think the status is for that?
Well, thank you, Mike. So greetings from California. It's always interesting to sit in the panel, with my utility colleagues to talk about really how do we make the grid more efficient? What technology do we need, right? I love what Lawanda said about, for SMUD, it's all about the customer. So none of these things matter. So SMUD is one of the early adopters in California. We're still one of the utilities in California that is still vertically integrated. What that means is that we don't belong to CAISO. We run our own balancing authority. We own our generation, we own our transmission, we own our distribution. So just in another context, right? California, I think, is the leading edge or bleeding edge, as you want to call it, of climate change legislation. We have a mandate for solar. We have a mandate for energy efficiency. We have a mandate for batteries. Now we have a mandate for electric vehicles. So there's mandate, mandate, mandate. And in fact, California, we're so far in the forefront that we said, hey, you know what? We were so successful in our early RPSs, we're going to double down. And in fact, cost is not an issue. Well, nobody told the legislator that the reason why we're successful is because gas prices went from $10 to $3, right? So I think, all of us in this room is talking about how do you use technology to make the grid more efficient, to bring value to the customer, right? The things that people expect from a utility, right? Safety, reliability, and affordability, and even more important, access to all, right? There's things that's in California right now. You cannot go through a single day driving to the office telling people to get off the grid. In fact, we have customer call SMUD and say, hey, wait a minute, I put in solar 2 months ago. Why am I getting a bill from SMUD? Nobody told them that, hey, you still connected to the grid. And in fact, you hear about people putting technology. We're one of the early adopters. So we said, you know what? Solar is great because it does actually help us to move toward a low carbon future. But there's heavy subsidies going through. For SMUD right now, there's a $36 million a year cross-subsidy that we're giving people to put on solar. And with the mandate, you just heard, Stephen talked about, right? California, by 2020, every single rooftop for residential is going to have solar. So the question really is not just about what's being a smart utility. Will utility exist in the form that it is in today? Or does utilities have to radically change the way our business model in order to survive? Certainly, you already have one California utilities, IOUs, that's in bankruptcy right now. And what's the reason? Wildfire, right? And the way California, the inverse condemnation piece. So our board has asked SMUD to say, hey, you know what? We are all about the customer, about the community. If we cannot provide those services and benefit the community, we shouldn't exist. Everything we do, we have 95% customer sat. Just give everyone a perspective. We have 3 to 6 public meetings a month that's open to public. All our business is conducted in public. Any Joe public can come and speak for 9 minutes in each meeting. We have 1.7 million customers, 630,000 accounts. 5% of that is like 50,000 people. And each one speaks 10 minutes. All we need is 50 people mad at you, and none of the execs, none of the board members, we have 7 elected board members are going home till 8 a.m. in the morning because our meeting starts at 5 o'clock at night. So what I'm wanting to impress on everyone is that the utility have to change our business model. SMUD, this is my 37th year in SMUD. I've been the chief customer officer, chief information officer, chief energy supply officer. And I think there's more changes in the last 7 years than all the previous 30 combined. I tell my colleagues, resistance is futile. Whether you like it or not, California governor is going 100%. In fact, we actually right now have a 60% RPS by 2030, and large hydro doesn't count. And we have 20% of hydro. So we said, you know what? If truly our world is changing in the way it is, our load and our peak demand is less than what it was 10 years ago. And if you think you can continue to raise your rates to cover your costs, your O&M costs, right, and your capital costs, I think we're fooling ourselves. So our board actually had adopted a new strategy for us. We said, yes, Paul, you need to go. So my job is actually, I think I have a pretty unique job in the industry right now. I have a job called, Chief Strategy and Operations Officer. So I'm responsible for the IRP, Integrated Resource Plan, how to get us to 60 or 100% RPS. I'm responsible for all my power contracts. I'm responsible for my balancing authority operations. I have transmission planning and distribution planning on operation and engineering. I have all our R&Ds, and I have a new group called New Business Development. And what does that mean? New business development for monopoly. That's almost blasphemous, right? We're nonprofit. What the heck are you talking about, Paul? So we told our board, okay? So whether you like it or not, customers are putting, for the first time in utility history, customers is now a prosumer, right? Every day, we're saying you need to get off the grid. You need to be independent because solar is cheaper. And don't you care about your children? Don't you care about the future? We just have passed a $7 billion IRP, the most expensive, most comprehensive IRP according to EDF, Environmental Defensive Fund. We're going to spend $2 billion in the next 20 years just for electric vehicles and building electrifications. And then why is that? Why is that important? You can talk about the grid, and everybody in here, I'm not going to belabor about how difficult it is with cybersecurity, with doing all this stuff, right? But how do you actually transition a company to say, hey, do you need to bring in strategic partners, not just to help your operations, but really develop new business models or new products or new services that your customer care about, that your customer is willing to, willing to invest in. So doing all this grid efficiency thing is great. I'm doing that. I'm doing what everybody is doing, okay? We just joined the EIM market. We just installed Siemens' first Spectrum 7 EMS system in the whole all of North America. So we went live with the energy imbalance market April 1st. We're putting an ADMS system. We're putting in a DERM system. We're already fully automated with AMI. But we said none of those things matter if you can't fix the rates, if you can't fix the subsidies, and if you can't transform your business into a way that you're technology agnostic. So right now, we actually have a new strict directive from our board. For the first time ever, SMUD is now we're going to look at, we said, we need to start looking at business ventures that bring in revenues other than electric revenues. So we have started, now we started this about a few years ago. So solar, right? You hear about solar, it's the subsidies creating. So we created something called Solar Share, community solar, that we say, you know what? Since we operate the complete grid, right? We can extract value from the power supply side, the market side, the transmission, distribution, right? All the way, to the beyond the meters. How do we actually develop a new business to take advantage of that? So we developed something called Solar Share, commercial Solar Share, that we're actually selling solar for up to our commercial customers. That instead of everyone putting it on a rooftop and actually causing us, people in the electric industry, and try how to best integrate that and create operation issues, why don't we take advantage of that and offer to our customer a product that they want? So we sold 130 megawatts of that in a year. We're also looking at, should we get into new businesses? You heard about, talk about Chattanooga this morning. Should we get into broadband? So we're very fortunate in California that we are a public-owned utility. Our board makes our own decisions. So we don't go through the CPUC for our rates. So we're revamping our whole rates. We're one of the first California utility to mandate a TOU. We're launching right now. Every single one of our customers went from a 3-tier to a single tier to a time of day use to make sure that the price signal that we're sending across matches the cost. We also introduced a new NIM, which is now, we're going to relook at it. It's going to be delayed because of the pushback that we get to start actually having a demand charge for putting something solar in California. And of course, that's a shockwave across the solar industry, right? So we're also looking at, should we invest or should we become business models to own even charging stations? Do we want to start actually thinking about even solar, partnering with people to put solar on? Do we need to transition our product and services from really traditional, what's always on the grid side, into the customer side? Do we want to start actually thinking about partnering to put charging as a service? Because if you really want to adopt California or move California into a low carbon or no carbon future, and if you want to get to the governor mandate of 5 million electric vehicles, what do you need to do to make that happen? Because that is beneficial growth for the utility. Because you cannot keep increasing the cents per kilowatt hours because it's declining. It's a death spiral. So is there a way you can actually optimize the grid and create new business models such as fiber? Do you want to have services? Do you want to own distributed generation? Do you want to create new services? And how do you actually, what does the company needs to do? The company, the utilities. What does electric utility needs to do to start looking at those new business models and partner not with the traditional, nothing against Siemens, we use Siemens all the time, right? Is there new computer companies? Is there new software companies? Is there a technology company? Me and Alan just came back from from China with the mayor of Sacramento. We're launching right now something called the California Mobility Center that I know Mike's were aware of when it was a Siemens, right? To say, if you are truly serious about moving to a decarbonized future, what are all the stuff that you need to do? The regulations, the policies, the businesses, the software, the hardware, all the integrated systems that you need to have to test out to go to a full autonomous e-mobility service. So our board just approved a $50 million expenditure on last Thursday to start actually bringing that center, working with the local universities, working with the legislators, working with the regulators, and the policymakers do that. So I think if I can impart on anyone in here today is that instead of the utilities are very good in terms of looking internally, focus how do we improve the operations. But I think it's behoove us to really start looking at how does all the new legislation, all the new regulations, and really where the world's going in decarbonization, and what opportunities that exist for the utilities to get into new business models. I know that's long, and I didn't answer, Mike, but...
Thanks, Paul. Absolutely. We'll take time for 2 quick questions. And are the financial markets the support or the resistance to moving this to the next step? I'll take one volunteer.
I'll take
Paul.
it. So that's what I meant earlier, right? So for example, if the California market right now, there's overgeneration, right? I think most of you is aware of the duck curve, the famous duck curve in California, that there's actually negative pricing during the day. So we're taking advantage of it now to say, okay, is there technology we can put in that encourages customer demand, flexibility versus demand response, to start actually putting a pricing signal in to do that, but also taking that savings and investing in new technology and new programs, so that we can actually have this transparent look from If I have something that the power market really needs, right, and there's actually value to be had there, how do I take that value and translate it all the way down to the customer and actually take that savings, either to develop the program itself or put in new technologies? Because we came to the conclusions that you can't keep adding costs. That means you have to get operational savings and actually dedicate a portion of that into new investments, into trying new programs. In fact, our board is going through a decision-making process right now because utilities we're pretty risk averse traditionally. So it's how do you actually take investments into new business ventures that we have never done before, and yet feel comfortable about doing that, and how do you actually even do that? And so we have a whole new business development group and working with venture capitalists right now to develop those models. That's a great point, Charles. In fact, we're working with the big threes, what they call the big threes, the 3 IOUs in California, to see if we collaboratively, us and LEWP, Los Angeles Water and Power, right, to say, is there a way you can actually use a POU which is structured differently? Because we don't have to have a rate of return on our capital investment. For us, it's the same money, same pot of money coming from our customers. So at the end of the day, is to say, can you start actually putting in business ventures, right, that would really benefit the customers, and especially those underserved communities, and start actually doing that, and start actually dedicated resources to do that. First, it's just the traditional say, hey, I need to get my investment in, my capital investment, to get my 11.5% return on, so that my stockholders, and the P ratios is actually, the Wall Street market is happy with. So actually, we're working with them. Is there a way we can work together, right, to start showing the regulators, right, and maybe let us be the forefront to show the regulator, like we did with the TOD. So we were the first one to put time of day use, because we had the $10 million from DOE to do the study, and people were very happy with it. So we launched. So after we launched, all the IOUs got their approval through the California Public Utility Commission. So they're right behind us right now to try to actually make sure the rates matches the cost of the market itself.
Thank you, guys.